I would like to get to some of the American involvement, people who, as journalists, you would often, in overseas positions, find somebody who had spent time in the Peace Corps and then cycled through, came back as a professional having a baseline of language familiarity, and this one fellow whose name I brought up earlier, Peter Lavoie, had spent time studying in India. In 2004, he had gone to the Naval War College in Monterey. He studied Urdu, and he spent time in the military. The Pentagon. But we seem at the end of your book, and it's a fascinating view on the background of some of the participants, and some of whom live in New York right now, and many are scattered, but even in the diplomatic corps, they don't have the deep base background to give them the familiarity. And three-dimensional chess is a very complicated region, and sometimes Crocker comes in from Iraq, and now you have in Afghanistan, you have the US ambassador who was in Turkey prior to that, which cycles through the empires and history. Maybe you want to comment on the type of people you did come across who were so-called experts in the White House or advising.
Yeah, I had kind of two motivations. One was this book and Ghost Wars and other books I've done very much influenced, informed by the books I read in college that I put up on my shelf and said, someday I'll do a book like that. And so those included like Bright Shining Lie by Neil Sheehan about a certain generation of ex-foreign correspondent, big books about Vietnam that were written by correspondents who had been out there but then came back and tried to put it all together. So Neil Sheehan's Bright Shining Lie, Halberstam's Best and the Brightest, Francie Fitzgerald's Fire in the Lake, a bunch of others, and then other big epic books like The Prize and so forth. And I could see that in the Halberstam in particular, but also in the Sheehan, that one of the devices for trying to bring forward the complexity, but also the dispiriting failure of the American experience in the war, was to make characters of the experts, not to treat them unsympathetically, but to treat them empathetically, but let the journey of their expertise kind of speak for itself, and then kind of layer a lot of those stories of experts. And these are wonderful people, well-motivated, genuinely expert. They had, as you say, like in Peter's case, like an experience of Pakistan long before 2001, when it was possible to travel, and he'd lived with a family in the Punjab and spoke Urdu, and there could hardly be someone in the American system who was more sympathetic to kind of the diversity of Pakistan or the potential of Pakistan. And yet, what does the American system do with that kind of expertise? It kind of grinds it up, it spits it out into it's like that Sneetch's machine in a Dr. Seuss book, where it goes in a machine and comes out looking like something else completely different. And so it's a tragedy of that expertise was also part of the motivation. And there was a more practical thing that explains a lot of the characters. There are many others besides Peter who are in the book, which was, with a big story like this, with a lot of layers and it's like a Russian novel, the cast of characters is daunting if you look at it, but I try to use character to keep the story moving. And so I'm always looking for characters who I can latch on to and then take a trip through some form of complexity, and through them humanize and make readable something that's complex. And so the glory of this particular project, for the first time in my experience, was that I was able to convert longtime sources into characters. Like basically go to them and say, yeah, I know I've been talking to you about this for 30 years, and I know your name has never surfaced in anything I've done, but don't you want to be a character in this book? Come on. You are. You're in the book. You're in the history. I've got to write about you, whether you want to talk to me or not.
You didn't have to use middle names.
So that made it, that was one thing that made the book kind of come together, was not just long experience, but the fact that the people I was writing about, in many cases, I didn't have to get to know as a reporter. I already understood kind of where they fit, how they operated.
And I think they understood where you had been writing I mean, Sangasar, where Mullah Omar had come from, not many people have been there, and I think even in the embassy in Langley, they were quite happy.
Yeah.